Chapter 2. Where's Raven? Where's Eric? Asked the frantic Charles, his mind still empty apart from his own. The sound of his worried voice had also had the same effect for both Logan, who had come to his senses, and Hank. Both mutants looked at each other with concern, and from the look of his eyes, Charles was not in the mood to be told to calm down. What happened out there, Hank? Said Charles, his voice going back to normal. Hank, Logan, and Charles had gotten back to the school that Charles had abandoned. Hank stared at Charles, just wanting for him to breathe, to let him explain, and so he does. He carefully explained how he attacked Eric for nearly killing Raven. He went on about how they fought and fought even when they fell into the fountain. He told them about how he attacked Eric in the fountain, the way he fought back, and the way he stayed still. Is he? Is he? Charles muttered. I thought of his friend, despite what he's done, could be dead if he still had his powers. No, he's not dead, but he's unconscious. I tried, but he won't move. His lips quivered for a bit, but that's all I could see. Hank reassured, knowing that Eric was a strong and powerful mutant. He can survive this. Charles sat down, his hand touched his face. He shook his head and looked up at Logan and Hank. We'll find Raven tomorrow, then we'll go for Eric. If something terrible happened to either of them, we're in trouble. Charles said his voice weak and low. Charles loved Raven. Raven was his sister, maybe not by blood, but she's still family. Eric, on the other hand, was more than family. He loved Eric as he means it. Since he and Eric met, since he saved for Eric that day, was something more than the start of our friendship. Charles couldn't sleep that night. He had another dose of the medicine for his legs to keep away the voices in his head. He kept the pain to himself unless it was Hank. Charles thought about Raven, but slowly Raven turned into Eric. From his eyes to his lips, Charles wanted him all. Without Eric, he felt more empty than before. In the morning, Charles managed to in get up and headed for breakfast, where Hank and Logan had already settled down. Morning, said Logan, his hair messy as usual and his eyes tinted with tiredness. Charles looked up as he sat down by the countertop, his hair also messy as he breathes with conscious breaths, deep and heavy. We need to hurry. If we want to secure our futures, then we need to find Eric and stop Raven. And if we don't, then our future won't no longer exist, replied Hank, who stopped what he was doing. So, what's the plan, Professor? Asked Logan, his eyebrows raised a little at the younger Charles. Charles shivered. Don't call me that. I'm no longer a professor. This isn't a school anymore. As Charles said to everyone, became silent and proceeded to finishing their breakfast. Nobody looked at each other's eyes, nor did they talked as both Hank and Logan listened to Charles. I'll find Raven. And Logan, you go with Hank and track Eric. Understand? Hank and Logan nodded, and Charles had sent them on their way. Before you go, if you discover anything or find Eric, let me know. Okay, but I won't make any promises easily, joked Logan before they went out the door. Logan never thought that this would be an easy mission at all. In fact, he doubted that he'll succeed. This is exactly what he meant. Looking for Magneto wasn't part of the plan, not to Charles anyway. So, where are we heading to, Hank? Asked Logan as he placed a cigar between his lips and lit it by a single matchstick. I don't know, but we got to start somewhere. Logan doesn't know what this meant, so he just went along with Hank. Hank was very different to Logan, for he hasn't seen Hank so young. He wouldn't have imagined it would have been the same man, also known as Beast. This was the past, so Logan thought he shouldn't judge. They secretly turned corners, and Hank couldn't resist but look around. Why so curious? Asked Logan as he walked behind Hank. Hank looked around once more before turning to Logan. They saw me. They know what I look like. They know what I look like outside the base. I need to be careful. We need to be careful, replied Hank as both of them walked away. Trask was messing with something he couldn't control. With Raven on the outside, she could be anyone and anywhere and anyone. Charles had to find her quick and keep Raven safe from Trask. However, Charles had soon realized his mistake, for his telepathy was gone. He can't contact Raven by any means. I'm such a fool! Oh, Raven, I miss you. Please, Raven, come home, said Charles in his head, yet it was still empty and isolated from his fear of hearing other people's voices and thoughts. He thought of Raven of, were somehow exchanged. His thoughts of Raven were somehow exchanged for Eric's, and for moments of silence, Charles thought he could hear Eric's voice seeping in his head. Eric, is that you? Whispered Charles. There was no answer. He thought he was going crazy and stopped. Charles sighed and closed his eyes. He opened them as fast as he could, his voice penetrating the barriers and had broken into his mind. Oh God, Eric! Charles screamed, his lungs expanding and his heart collapsing. Charles was no longer thinking about his sister, but his friend, his soulmate. End of chapter 2.